When talking about directors, most people don't usually jump to thinking about Joe Dante, but he's typically one of the first that comes to my mind. I've been fascinated by Dante's work all my life, from watching Looney Tunes back in action as a kid to my annual Christmas viewings of Gremlins. Dante has a vast filmography, but his films all share similar ideals and inspirations. But before we can understand these, we need to know about Dante's background and how that affected his films. Dante grew up watching B-grade monster movies and cartoons. In fact, Dante was so interested in cartoons that he almost became a cartoonist himself. However, he was told cartooning isn't an art form and he took film instead. He attended the Philadelphia College of Art and said much of what he learned came from Roger Corman.
Joe Dante went on to become a very well-known, successful director who started cutting trailers for us.
In his free time as a student, he also compiled a 7-hour compilation of B-movie clips titled The Movie Orgy. Dante's success came right as the blockbuster era began, just after Jaws came out in 1975. Dante's breakout hit was with Piranha, which was a parody of the movie, and along with a few other movies, he caught the eye of Steven Spielberg. Spielberg was producing Gremlins and signed Dante on to direct the film, launching Dante's career and, more importantly, his style. The majority of Dante's films follow similar premises and tropes, often combining cartoonish characters and creatures with elements of the horror genre. Despite the joy brought by the animated nature, these films hold darker implications, often tackling the concept of fear itself. Let's start with Dante's hit film Gremlins, which was released in 1984 and was the fourth highest grossing film of the year. The movie takes place in the suburbs, which becomes an important setting for Dante's films. The town finds itself under attack by strange creatures called Mogwai. Gremlins shows the fear of the other invading the idyllic suburbs. Dante returns to this theme much more directly with The Burbs, which finds a group of suburbanites growing paranoid over their strange new neighbors. However, with Gremlins, the fears are much more directly related to race. The suburban town of Gremlins is mostly populated with white residents, and the town is not disrupted until an inventor brings a Mogwai, which he finds at a store owned by an overly stereotyped Chinese man. The Mogwai themselves have strange traits that can be associated with African American stereotypes. In the book Ceramic Uncles and Celluloid Mammies, Patricia A. Turner writes how the evil Mogwai are seen devouring fried chicken, wearing shades and caps, dancing, and stealing the protagonist's girlfriend. Turner writes that these feel out of place considering how in the 1980s, the white filmmaking community and its audiences ostensibly accept the African American's right to share in America's wealth. She goes on saying, perhaps the impulse to assign black characteristics to otherworldly creatures reflects a subconscious belief that blacks are still intruders whose demands for equality have escalated into a desire for dominance. Perhaps it's Dante's inspirations seeping in that make the Mogwai this way. The Mogwai are the most animated creatures in the movie, drawing from the cartoons Dante grew up on. These cartoons, including Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, were not always sensitive and often stereotyped or played down groups of people. In fact, some were so insensitive that companies like Warner Brothers now air messages in front of collections of these cartoons.
The Looney Tunes and their irreverent brand of humor are products of their time. Unfortunately, at that time, racial and ethnic differences were caricatured in ways that may have embarrassed and even hurt people of color, women, and ethnic groups. Now, these jokes were wrong then, and they are wrong today. But removing these inexcusable images and jokes from this collection would be the same as saying they never existed.
There's also the fact that Gremlins is a horror film. Horror films often reflect society's cultural fears, with monsters often representing the other, those whose differences scare us. Dante's future films didn't have the same underlying tones of race, although race wasn't left out entirely as a topic. Dante continued to explore concepts of fear though, paying particular attention to American politics and how people capitalized on fear. Dante took to his roots of watching B-movies to make 1993's Matinee, where a big-time low-budget filmmaker makes his way to the suburbs of Key West, Florida, to debut his new film, Mant. Matinee takes place during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where fear is high and war feels imminent. As the filmmaker Lawrence Woolsey arrives, he brings accomplices with him who act as protesters against the film to up the film's fear factor. He also uses gimmicks with the screening to play up the film, installing new technology in the theater and having a local man run around as the Mant. The people of Key West, or at least some of them, view this film as an escape to avoid their fears of impending military conflict. However, Woolsey is not just a filmmaker but also a salesman, one who capitalizes on fear. He shows people these movies and they go to escape the threat of the real world, trying to blur reality and fiction so they can be less scared. Unfortunately, fear makes for a better profit, and Dante's tribute to B-movies shows how the unending grind of capitalism heightens Americans' fear of war. One movie from Dante's filmography falls about halfway between the politics of Gremlins and Matinee. 1998's Small Soldiers shows what happens when a toy company uses government technology to create toys that can function on their own. The resulting toys are separated into two groups: the Commander Elite Soldiers and the Outcast Gorgonites. Here, the Gorgonites are treated as the oppressed other. The Commander Elites hunt down the Gorgonites at all costs due to an unnecessary hatred and need for power. It's part of the Elites' programming. Although decades after, the film bears resemblance to the Vietnam War, which left many Americans with a sour taste. Soldiers are told to fight a war that they don't really need to fight. Here, they're fighting in suburban houses, wrecking people's way of life. By making the soldiers toys, Dante depicts how war is marketed to people. The soldiers frequently reference war movies, and the imagery of the film alludes to these same movies. Dante critiques the American war movie and how it paints a false narrative that shows war as a good and profitable thing. If anyone doesn't get enough credit for being an auteur, it's Joe Dante, whose movies have gone unseen and unrecognized for far too long. His influences are clear, and his themes of fear and the invasion of suburbia wind throughout his films. Plus, who else could have given us Gremlins?